Well, thank you. Now, I just want to check, because we have lunch afterwards, and I know never to fight food and children. That's my pay.
We just had that conversation.
Okay. So, I'm going to, you've had an awful lot of talking today, and so I really want you to do some activity, some things. I came to storytelling. I came to celebrant work as a storyteller. And when you know loads and loads and loads and loads of stories, what you discover is that there's really only one story, and that's the story of transformation, of birth and life and death, the life cycle. And that ritual is basically telling a story, much like a film editor edits stories. Now, today, my particular theme is including children. But the ideas that I'm going to offer to you and the way of thinking about your writing of a ceremony really go beyond just children. It goes to any event. As I often tell my clients, there is no ritual police. Right? We're not living in Iran where they walk through the streets and make sure you're following the law, right? We can do what needs to be done. So you really want to listen to the story that your client is telling and find the way to interpret that, to tell it through space, ritual action, and narrative, whether it's in the form of poetry or in the form of story. So let's start with a story, something to wake you all up. Okay, once there was a very rich merchant who was riding through the woods when suddenly out of the forest there came robbers. They fell upon him and were going to steal his gold when suddenly out of the woods came a great big smelly small-toothed dog and chased the robbers away. "Thank you," said the man. "You've saved me and my money, and I want to give you a reward. I have many treasures at home. You can have anything you want. I have a goose that lays golden eggs. Would you like that?" "No," said the dog. "Well, I have a harp that plays any song you want to hear." "No," said the dog. "Well, I have a bowl that's always filled with food. Would you like that?" "No," said the dog. "But those are my greatest treasures. What is it that you want? I will give you anything that you want." "I want to marry your daughter." "What? A great big smelly small-toothed dog marry my daughter? Never!" And the man jumped on his horse and rode away. But the next morning, the dog was at his front door. "Father, father," said the girl, "there's a dog at our door, a great big smelly small-toothed dog." And the father told her the whole story. And she said, "But father, you promised." "I have to go with the dog." And so she got on the dog's back, and now you're going to help me. Ready? He ran across the fields until he got to a hedge, and he stopped. And then he leapt over the hedge. Do that. And then ran across the next field until he got to another hedge. And then leapt over the hedge and ran across the third field, and leapt over the hedge and ran until he came to a beautiful castle. "This is my dog house." And of course it was a magical castle filled with toys and food and wonderful things, and oftentimes the girl and the dog would go out on the lawn, and she would take a golden ball and she would throw it, and he would fetch, and she would throw it, and he would fetch, and she would throw it, and he would fetch. And sometimes he put his head upon her lap, and she would stroke his golden fur and say, oh dog, you are sweet, sweet as a honeycomb." But at night, the girl grew sad. She would cry, and she would miss her father. And one night, the dog came to her and said, Girl, tomorrow I will take you to visit your father." "Oh, dog, you are sweet, sweet as a honeycomb." So the next morning, the dog was waiting. The girl got on the dog's back and ready. Across the field they ran until they got to the hedge and stopped. And he said, "What do you call me?" And she said, sweet, sweet as a honeycomb. Yes! And over the hedge she jumped, and across the field he ran till he got to the second hedge. Girl, girl, what do you call me? Oh, but now she got impatient. Oh, you great big smelly small-toothed dog! And he turned and ran back to the castle. And that night the girl cried. And the dog came to her and said, girl, girl, tomorrow I will take you to visit your father. Oh, dog, dog, you are sweet, sweet as a honeycomb. And the next morning the dog was waiting. The girl got on the dog's back, and across the field they ran till they got to the hedge. Girl, what do you call me? Sweet, sweet as a honeycomb. Yes! And across the field they ran till they got to the second hedge. Girl, girl, what do you call me? Sweet, sweet as a honeycomb. Yes! And across the field they ran till they got to the third hedge. Now she could see her father's house off in the distance. Girl, girl, what do you call me? Oh, you great big smelly small-toothed dog! And the dog ran back to the castle. And that night the girl cried, and the dog came to her and said, girl, tomorrow I will take you to see your father. Oh, dog, dog, you are sweet, sweet as a honeycomb. Well, the next morning the dog was waiting. The girl got on the dog's back, and across the field they ran. First hedge. Girl, what do you call me? Sweet, sweet as a honeycomb. Yes! Across the field they ran to the second hedge. Girl, what do you call me? Sweet, sweet as a honeycomb. Yes! Across the field they ran. Third hedge. Now she could see her father's house off in the distance. Girl, girl, what do you call me? Sweet, sweet as a honeycomb. Yes! And across the field they ran all the way up to her father's house. And now the girl got off the dog's back and put her hand on the doorknob, and the dog said, wait! Girl, girl, what do you call me? And she turned, she went, oh, you great big smell! But this time she stopped. You know why? Because she looked in his eyes. And you know what she saw there? Tears. Oh, dog, dog, you are sweet. Sweet as a honeycomb. Yes. And the dog stood up on his hind legs, reached up and took hold of his smelly fur and pulled it down. And underneath his dog skin was a prince. And so it was that the girl and the prince were married and went to live in the castle. And oftentimes she would take a golden ball, and they would go out on the lawn, and she would throw it, and he would run and fetch, and she would throw it, and he would run and fetch. And sometimes he would put his head in her lap, and she would stroke his golden hair, and he would smile at her with a perfect set of little teeth. And she would say, oh, prince, you are sweet, sweet as a honeycomb. Now, that little ritual is not about love. It's about connection and about recognizing that oftentimes the connections we make transform the moment into magic. That's what children do. Children at a ceremony can't do anything wrong. That's why W.C. Fields would never be in a film with children, right? Children and dogs, they can't do anything wrong. Well, dogs can do some things wrong. But more than that, what they do transforms the moment, creates the story. Because the story of the ceremony, even a funeral, and I'll speak about that in a second, goes back to our sense of birth, life, death. And without including that sense of birth, that sense of renewal, we can't really create a ceremony of depth and heart. And when you include children, if you have the opportunity to include children, it gives you a tool. It gives you one of those tools to tell the story, whether it is a naming or a wedding or a funeral or any other kind of ceremony. So, for instance, and I'm going to give you 3 quick examples. I'm conscious of my time. Actually, if you could give me a 10-minute as well as a 5-minute, I would appreciate it. I think I go to 1:45, so I have plenty of time. But I'll give you a couple of examples of different kinds of ceremonies and how the child created the story. So the most obvious, a baby naming, right? Baby namings are wonderful events. Everybody's going to celebrate. But what's important at the baby naming? The baby is only a roast beef, right? The baby is not going to do anything, right? And everybody loves and sees and looks and coos, but the baby isn't really what the ceremony's about. The ceremony is about the connection of looking at the baby and seeing the magic underneath the skin, right? Just like the dog. A baby is ultimately a big, smelly dog, right? As a matter of fact, there's a wonderful Jewish folk tale about a man, a shepherd, who goes down to town because from the mountains, shepherds are up in the mountains, walks all the way down to town with his newborn because he wants the baby to have a bris. And of course, when he gets to the synagogue, Jews need a minyan, 10 people to say the certain rituals, and there isn't a 10th man. But luckily, an old man arrives just at the moment. Not only is he an old man, he's a moil, he's the one who does the circumcisions. He does the circumcision, he makes the blessing. The man is so relieved, and now he heads home. And the long journey home is short. And when he gets home, of course, you know what you have to do. You have to change the baby's diapers. So the wife takes the baby, thankful that her husband has gotten home. She goes to change the baby's diapers, and she screams, "What's wrong?" And the man runs over and looks. And don't you know that the diaper is filled with gold? And from that day, the baby's diapers were always filled with gold. Well, of course, the moil was the prophet Elijah. And the gold is everybody's feeling about their great big smelly baby, right? But the truth is, you have to reveal the gold, right? And the way to do that is by creating blessings. Now, I personally try to follow the Australian tradition that civil celebrants are civil celebrants. I have no objection if people want certain blessings, and in many baby namings they include very particular religious blessings. But I basically say, how can we create a blessing that is a civil blessing? A blessing that doesn't connect just to the liturgy of some particular faith. And in many baby blessings, the way I do that is by including people holding the baby. So, first we have the parents, the grandparents. I'm going to read the example here that I have. From ancient times, names have been the connection between generations, preserving in memory the traditions and values of our grandparents. I asked Joan and Pearl and Gerald to bless this baby with the name Julia Rose. Those are the grandparents who are coming up. So actually, they're blessing first before the parents. Now, this was a Jewish-Irish baby naming. The Jewish tradition names after the dead, not after the living. So these grandparents were actually giving names of their parents to the baby. Her English name preserves the initials of her grandmother, Joan Rita. May her love, loyalty, and compassion be realized in her granddaughter. And the name Kila Itana, her Hebrew name, Kila for Pearl's grandmother and Itana for her great-grand aunts, Etel and Erna, all three of whom perished in the Holocaust. Connection, connection, connection. The parents come forward and they read their own particular blessings, whatever they wanted to say about the baby. Here's just one of them for an example. I'm dealing with time, so I'm moving fast. We chose to give Julia Rose the same initials as my mother. Initials, it doesn't have to be the whole name, right? What's the connection? If it's not a name, maybe it's a blanket. The blanket that great aunt Anna knit, or the baby clothes, or the hat, right? How do you connect? And then they recite the Irish blessing, may the road rise up to meet you. Not my choice, but their choice. And oftentimes I find that aesthetically I might prefer something, but that's my taste. To them, this is what has the meaning and the connection, right? I then called all the immediate family up, which included a 3- and a 5-year-old. And what we did is we did a signing. We asked them to pledge that they would help this baby grow. Will you learn together the value of family? They all respond, yes. Will you be friends forever? Yes. To Liam, Nora, MJ, and Daniel, will you care for and love Julia Rose? We will. Will you be her guide through her life? We will. Will you touch her with wisdom? Right? And then all signed a document. Right? We then had all the guests create blessings, which they put the Jewish concept of the kvittel, which is a small prayer put into a chink of a wall or the gravestone of a saint, right? All the guests put into a magic box, into a treasure box, a kvittel, a blessing that Julia Rose will have for the rest of her life to go back to. Can you imagine what it's going to be like when she's 16 and her heart is broken and she can find this box that's filled with love, right? Or all through her life. So we've created an heirloom. You know, that's the most obvious sort of ceremony where you include children. But what about weddings? That's a common time when people say, what am I going to do with my wedding? In some places, I've actually had the 5-month-old baby, you know, brought at the end of the ceremony before I do the pronouncement, so that the whole family is there. You know, oftentimes I'll obviously have the children come up and hold hands and we'll say some sort of blessing. One of my favorite clients had a poem. I could have written something polished, but I could never have written something as memorable. And it is always amazing what children will produce. I've had, you know, children who are in 5th grade and children who are teenagers, you know, come up with wonderful things. And it's because in that moment they speak directly, if not elegantly. And it's really more important to speak directly. I'm going to do a little game with you. Here, I'm going to read one other little poem that was written by a child. Love. You can tell your love in many ways. You can tell it in the things you say, the smiling and laughing, the highs and the lows, the ups and the downs. Don't forget the way it goes. Nothing can stop your love. Nothing can overcome a love greater than anything than this world can show. We are grateful to have you in our life. Now let me stop this so you can be husband and wife. I think they were like 14. So you just never know, you know? And the point of including children is to give the opportunity, that piece of magic. Now I'm going to pass something out real quick. We're going to do it real quick. And I'm also going to pass out, as I'm doing this, if you could start passing things along, there's odes to common things, and then there's a fly sheet for my book that's coming out in September, and I'm able to offer a pre-publication price. So if anybody's interested in ordering one through the summer, I'm able to save about 25%. So we're going to write a quick poem, or we're going to create a quick poem. You have to, in order to get this kind of material out of people, you have to think sensually. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. So what I would like you to do is to create a very short poem that celebrates children. What are the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching? Now, my example, which is on your sheet, I have to take my sheet out. My example was, outside laughter brings an inside storm. So I'm using hearing. A test of patience and a prize of loving warmth. Touching. Each pattern of sharing leads a bit apart. Each moment of joy fills and breaks my heart. To say hello and to begin to learn goodbye. Okay? The experience of children. I would like each of you to very quickly, because we only have like 2 more minutes, right? Turn to your partners. 2 or 3 people together, as in the way you're sitting, that would be the most convenient. And come up with 5 words that describe children. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. 5 words. Okay? You have 1 minute. 5 words. Thank you. What was the poem? First word, seeing. Give me one. Who has a word for seeing? Imaginative. Imagine where we will go. Okay. Smelling. Smelly places, dark and damp. Hearing. Loud giggles filling us with jam. Tasting. Sweet moments of I am. What did I forget? Touching. Last one. Touching. Sticky. Sticking us together forever and ever. Okay. So this is a way, 1 minute to go. This is a way, it's called synecdoche thinking. It doesn't necessarily feel like anything is going to come out of it. But amazingly, you can see the excitement, right? And that is really what it is when you put a child in there. Sure, it may be nothing but the 2-year-old walking down the aisle or somebody having to pick her up and carry her down the aisle, right? But so much more than that often happens. It's trusting, it is in a sense trusting in the improbable, but it's also that the connections are there in us. The story of life is in your guests already. All you have to do is give it the image and the sensory connection for the story to come alive. So when I offer you my advice about including children, it's really, and it's advice about the whole process of writing a ritual, but particularly with children, trust. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. All the things that might make people say children can't be included are really the openings that you have to include children and make them the moment that will really connect us in a ritual. So I'll finish with one thing. I had a funeral this week of one of my cousins. I've become the family everybody, right? Everything, ritual person. You know, it was very simple. My cousin was in her 80s, but it was a sort of sad story. And at the gravesite, I had only one thing to say, and it was a story about when we were all children. And my great-grandmother said to me that when we die, a little part of us goes to everyone we loved. And a part of my cousin was in each of us at that moment. And, you know, it was me as a child, and all of us, because we were all cousins there at the gravesite, all of us understanding the great gift that is given when your family connects you. And, you know, not everybody has that gift given to them in family, but the people who self-select and come to a civil celebrant look for that gift as part of their ritual. And that's what makes our rituals so important. Thank you very much.